Welcome to the Sales Pulse podcast. I'm Marla Koupal. In the Sales Pulse podcast, we focus on building sales one clear, curious conversation at a time. Have you ever walked away from a sales conversation and thought, that felt a little awkward, that was off, but you couldn't explain why? You thought the numbers you offered felt fair, and you thought that it was a great deal. The buyer might have seemed interested, but your conversation, even though it moved forward, didn't go anywhere. And afterwards, you felt awkward and confused. There's a reason for that. Every sales conversation is designed to work with that specific buyer. Doesn't matter about what kind of a pitch you have. You want to shape a conversation that will get you to those closing results. If one conversation didn't work, take a look at it, review it, and determine what you can take away from that will allow you to reshape and shape a better conversation the next time. Each conversation you have shapes how you will show up the next time if you're paying attention and reviewing what it is you say and do and how you behave in each sales conversation. If you use one consistent pattern in your sales conversations and do not adapt and design your conversations per buyer, then those habits will carry into your next sales conversation. Over time, those sales conversations and conversational patterns and expectations from yourself will turn into habits that you have to ask yourself, are those the habits I'd like to have? Are they effective? Are they getting me somewhere? You want to be having conversations that quietly build the strengths you need to be that powerful and successful salesperson. Let's look at where these show up in real time so that you'll know what it is you have to take a look at and consider in order to develop a healthy sales conversation pattern. So if you as a seller move quickly to a solution, the focus is shifting away from the buyer. It is shifting away from the buyer's thoughts and thinking, and it's leaving you out in the cold as well as the buyer. That's where the buyer experiences pressure. They have to listen to you. They have to hear all your answers of why. But that's the thing that most salespeople fear, is being pushy. Even though your intention might be to be helpful, stop with all the information. Hold back and let the buyer get involved. Don't keep things on a surface level with just you spewing forth a lot of information. You weaken the buyer's opportunities to make choices every time you give too much information and jump to a solution. If you keep doing that, then you are having a pattern of a salesperson who feels transactional. When you're transactional, it shows that you're not really caring about the buyer, and that's a behavior that doesn't pay off long term. Leave those information dumps behind. What the buyer wants to experience are details that will help them get into their own stream of consciousness and see how it's a fit. They need pauses. They need time to think. They need time to pull out what's concerning them, what it is they want to say. Remember, if you talk too much, the buyer stops processing. And you need them to process in order to get to yes. Sometimes the buyers decide the conversation's not for them, so they stop listening to you, just nod and smile. If you are one of those salespeople doing those types of conversations where the buyers are always just becoming silent and then bowing out, finding an excuse to leave, you're realizing you have no opportunity for follow-up. When you hear and sense hesitation from the buyer, stop, explore it, let the buyer think and share with you. You want buyers to speak about every hesitation they have. You want conversation to continue with more information from the buyer so that you have clarity on how to frame the rest of the information and directions that you share. You don't want delays in decision-making from your buyer. Each of these moments I mentioned are small when it happens, but each one builds up to a behavior pattern in your sales conversations that does not pay off. And ultimately, it shapes how you sell. And it doesn't mean you have good sales conversations, behaviors, or strategies. There's a quote from Mark Manson who says that every decision you make shapes who you have to live with tomorrow. So every day when you finish your sales conversations, you have to decide, am I who I want to live with tomorrow? Is it exciting for me to get into sales conversations and to continue to support people? Am I showing up in a real way that feels good to me? You want to live with habits that take place inside that conversation you're having. Look at the way you're asking questions and how that will help buyers think through their situations and respond to you. The way you listen shapes what the buyers are willing to share with you. And the way you pace the conversation shapes whether the buyer can even form a decision. And remember, it's okay if you get a yes or a no. At least things are clear. When you pay attention to the details that the buyer shares, you will realize that conversations are only to be designed. Nobody is the same. You want to create a conversation that will work with each individual at the point in time you are working with that individual. So design your conversations as they're unfolding. This will depend on your ability to adjust on what each buyer is experiencing. To design a sales conversation, you have to create space for the buyer to think. In fact, I call it create the buying space. And you create buying spaces when you allow the buyer to speak more than you. At least make the conversation 60-40, 60% buyer, 40% sales. But when you get really good, it's 80% buyer, 20% sales. So when buyers feel understood, conversations will gain momentum. When they gain clarity on how your offer might support them, momentum forms quickly. And with that amount of clarity on the buyer's side, decisions flow naturally. So this is not about changing who you are. This is about refining your craft, your conversations with the buyer. Each conversation is just a situation that's been presented to you. So here's 3 things that you want to do to design a sales conversation. You listen with intention, you ask with curiosity, and you allow the buyer to arrive at their own decision with confidence. When you have your next conversation, pay attention to the moments that shape that experience. Notice how you open the conversation. Notice how often you give them time to think out loud and talk and digest the information that they have. And notice all those moments in which you stay present with the buyer and keep yourself from moving too quickly. These simple adjustments will improve your sales conversation, improve your habits, improve your behaviors, and strengthen those opportunities for follow-up on every sales conversation. Craft a version of you that every buyer will want to interact with. Leave me comments on how this is helping you make shifts and more successful sales. And in a month or so, come back and tell me what you're noticing. If this episode gave you some new perspectives, some new insights, and some willingness to try something new, then be sure to subscribe and follow on YouTube, Apple, or Spotify. And until next time, be curious and make more sales.